Hey everyone, you're listening to Midlife Matters. I'm Marie, and each week I'm joined by my friends Julie and Mindy to talk about all the topics keeping women in the middle years up at night. Our friend Elizabeth Boyd is joining us today to talk about the joy of becoming a midlife mother. Elizabeth has an amazing testimony of love, loss, and God's provision that we can't wait for you to hear. Let's get started. Welcome to Midlife Matters, Elizabeth. We are so glad to have you today.
Well, I'm happy to be here.
Listeners, you're in for a real treat today. We actually had a request from one of our listeners to have someone in midlife on who has little kids. Because Julie, Mindy, and I, we have kids that are in college, maybe middle school, but we don't have anyone in the preschool, obviously baby, elementary years. So I happened to see a picture of Elizabeth on Instagram a few weeks ago, and she was celebrating her 45th birthday surrounded by, I think, 3-year-old twins and a 5-year-old. First of all, I thought, wow, she looks great.
I know.
Second of all, I thought, what if I had 3-year-old twins and an elementary child right now? What would that feel like? And then I thought, hey, she's the perfect one to answer this listener's question. What is it like to be at midlife with little kids? We've gone to the same church with Elizabeth for probably over 10 years. And just a couple weeks ago, we met for coffee and I finally got to hear the awesome testimony that Elizabeth has.
And I didn't even know we were neighbors. I just found out our backyards almost back up together. She lives in the next.
Yeah.
Yes.
I know. I've actually been to Elizabeth's house, I think when your son was born, maybe, and I brought a meal.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I think
vaguely remember
it's
that.
been a long, I know, it's been like a lot of life has happened. But yes, you guys are very close. I forgot about that.
Mm-hmm.
So that is so cool. So we are so glad to have you on today, Elizabeth, and we can't wait to hear your story. Why don't you introduce yourself to the listeners?
Well, my husband and I, we've been married for about 10 years. And like you said, we have 3 little children, and they're all about to have their birthdays. So we have a 6-year-old, and our twins are almost 4 years old.
Oh, wow.
So my oldest is a boy, the 6-year-old is a boy, and the twins are boy-girl.
Oh, that's so exciting. I bet your house is really busy.
It is very, very busy.
Yes.
Those are
And very,
fun
very
ages.
excited. Yeah.
Not your typical midlife stage. It's not all.
Well, it is
all look the
definitely
same for everybody.
That's true. It is definitely our normal, though. I don't know what I would do without them. Like today, I came home and I work out every day at 4:45 in the morning. So after breakfast and after my oldest went off to kindergarten, I was like, okay, we're going to cuddle for about 30 minutes. And I had 2 of the most adorable playmates climbing all over me while I was on the couch trying to rest for a little bit. So I wouldn't have it any other way for sure.
Oh, wow. And I'm just floored by the fact that you work out at 4:45 every morning.
Well, if it weren't at 4:45, when would it be?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, she can answer that question like, for the person that's trying to find a time to work out. There you go. 4:45.
There you go. Yeah.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about your story, Elizabeth? How did you get to this point?
The point of being 45 with 3 little children.
Yes.
To me, like I said, it just seems normal because it's my life. And I guess I just had to back up and think about how it came to be that I did things a little bit later than everyone else.
Okay, so you grew up in a Christian family in the suburb of Boston, but you had said that your faith wasn't really your own.
I always went to church with my family. And I could tell by the other kids and the other teenagers, they just had this light shining on them. And I just did not know where that came from. I knew that I was missing something and I knew I didn't feel that. Thought that maybe I just wasn't the same as them. Maybe I wasn't built with the same capacity to have faith. In my teenage years, then when I went off to college, I didn't really put forth a huge effort to go to church, be a Christian, or lead a godly life. And when the crisis would come up or problems, and my mother would say, oh, you should just pray about it, I really was very confused by that because I thought, well, what on earth How could that possibly help me? Because I just really did not understand what it was. I didn't have the relationship, so I didn't understand what that was all about. So as I graduated from college and started out on my own, it was the same thing. There were times where I knew something was missing. That piece was missing in my life, and I knew it's something that I wanted. So there were times where I would go to church or would go to Bible study, but again, it just fell flat because I was reading the Bible and reading the stories, and I knew a lot, but I did not have that relationship. And I didn't even know enough to know that's what I was missing. Then, fast forward a few years, and I had a career, it was pretty successful, and I met someone, and I've been previously married. So I got married when I was 28. So he was not a Christian. At the time, I guess I was just really okay, it's just kind of time for me to get married. And we were compatible, and he was successful. And it just ended up being a very bad situation. It was very, very negative. After we were married for a little while, and I had many phone calls home of the problems that we were having. My father said to me at one phone call that, we don't believe in divorce. That's not what we want for you, but we also do not want you to stay in a situation like this, because things had gotten that bad. I was really falling apart. This was a really big bottom for me. And when I realized that, okay, I've been making all these decisions on my own, and I've been trying to build a life based on what I thought it should look like. And I thought I don't want to live my life like that anymore. I want to find out what this whole following God thing is all about. I've heard all these stories about people who go on mission trips, and they're like, oh, I don't have any money at all. And then I'm just going to go to the airport, and in faith, something will happen, and bam, it does. And I'm like, I want that life. I want the life that is dependent upon God, and I want to know what that is all about. So it was during this time that I surrendered for the very first time. And I just prayed to God, and I said, okay, I am ready. I'm going to follow you, but I know that you're going to have to be very bold with me and to show me exactly what it means to follow you, because I do not know and I don't understand. And so it was at this time my mother sent me this Living Translation Bible. One of her friends suggested she send this to me. It was a 12-step Bible. Oh. Now, I don't have an addiction to anything, but it was actually a great Bible to read for codependency and a whole lot of other things. And really what I discovered in reading it about addiction is that anytime that we put anything in front of God, it's a form of addiction. Mm-hmm. So my job, money, success, marriage, all those things that were so superficial that were more important to me than God were addictions of sorts.
Okay, yeah.
So it was just a really awesome Bible. And then I met these older ladies in this Bible study. So I started going to Bible study with them. They were just so full of love. And they just poured their love on me. And when I looked at them and saw their faces, and it was something I had never experienced before. And I think maybe because they were older, I could receive it more. Mm-hmm. And maybe because they were older, they could give it more than if I had been with peers. Just the love that they had. And I knew it came from God. So I was like, I don't really know anything, but I know that if this is the God and this is God's love, then that's what I want also. So I started reading the Bible, and instead of the normal Bible studies that I had gone to where I filled out a sheet, a worksheet and all that, this was I was just seeking him, and I was just seeking his face. And there were different times where I was having emotional troubles. I mean, I was still dealing with my husband, even though we were not living together. We were separated at the time. And it was still emotionally very difficult. I remember going to one of the ladies in the Bible study and having kind of a one-on-one session with her. And she told me, I said, this is everything that he's doing. And I was just had a litany of complaints, and it just seemed so dramatic at the time. And she said, I hear a lot of pride in what you're saying, Elizabeth. And I was like, pride? What are you talking about? She said, yeah, pride. I said, don't you think what he's doing is wrong? And she said, well, of course it is. But is there anything that you can do about that? And I was silent. And I was like, no. And she said, look, you're not going to change him.
Yeah.
The only thing that you can do is seek God. And that is the only thing that you can do. And you let God worry about that man.
She was a
And
wise
just,
lady.
yes. And she said, just like Moses, she said, I want you to be like Moses. And I looked at her and I was like, I can't be like Moses. Are you out of your mind? Is what I was thinking and feeling. And she said, Moses asked God to see his face. And you ask God to see his face. And when he shows it, he just shone with God's love and God's being and God's presence. That is what you are to do. I was dumbfounded. I was like, I really thought she was going to give me wise, practical advice about what to do and what to say to this man and how to fix things.
Right.
I love that. I mean, what a beautiful picture of a Christian friend that comes alongside you. It's not so much about the problem, but it's about helping each other keep your eyes on the Lord. It's not that she minimized your problem at all.
Yeah.
You have no control over him, but she was with you. What beautiful words. What great advice.
Yeah. And it was her advice in saying that to me really changed my life. And I remember a girlfriend of mine who actually suggested I talk to her about this. She was like, so what'd she say? What'd she say? And when I told her, she looked at me like I had 10 heads. And I said, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to follow her advice.
Well,
and she again looked at me like I was crazy. And because she too thought that I would be getting advice about something practical, what to do, a list, maybe.
Right.
And so kind of like my workouts at the time, I would wake up at 4:00 in the morning before work and I would read the Bible. I was taking a Beth Moore Bible study at the time, and I would journal and just learn about God and what he had to say to me, and just kind of really internalizing the words that I was reading and applying it to my life. The ladies I was in Bible study with, it was every Tuesday night that we would meet. And there were weeks that I would live for Tuesday nights, and I was just like barely getting through the week. But they just said to me, God sees your faithfulness. Just continue to seek him. And it just emboldened me to hear that. Like, even though at the time I wasn't feeling like anything I was doing was making a difference at all, but their words, like, God will see your faithfulness, I just clung to that. At the time, it wasn't that I wanted anything. I just wanted him. And I just wanted to have a different life. And that's all I knew.
Right.
That
so
relationship.
So that really encouraged me. And yeah, I mean, this was a long period of time. This was a few years that I spent just really seeking God being my main priority in life, and really not worrying about the status of anything else. We were still technically married, even though we were not spending a whole lot of time together. We were definitely separated. I still had hope that something would happen and God would move and we could be joined together again, but was not showing it would happen. But again, I didn't worry about that at all. I was finally seeing God really, really change me, bring about a peace that I had never known before. And it was just a beautiful thing. So as this was happening inside of me, I asked God, I was like, okay, thank you, God, for moving in my life in this way, in this awesome, awesome way. What do you want now from me, from my life? How can I serve you? And it was at this time that I had the opportunity to join a group of ladies to go into the prison, the Tennessee Prison for Women, and to tutor GED.
Wow.
So they had asked me if I would do that. It was right around the same time I was asking God and seeking God, like, okay, what should I do with my life? And then I was asked to tutor GED. At first I was like, I'm not sure. And then I was like, this is what it might be. This is what he wants me to do. And so then I thought to myself, sure, of course I can tutor GED. I'm good at English and math. And of course I can do it. And so I went in there, and it didn't take me very long at all to realize I can't do this at all. I'm completely unequipped. because it was nothing about it was traditional. Like
Right.
there wasn't like, oh, material. And, it was not straightforward. So I left and I said, okay, God, I can't do this. So you are going to have to do it for me, through me, with me. I went back the next time, and through time after time, I mean, I just saw God work in awesome things. And through my time there, I saw 21 women get their GEDs.
Wow, that's amazing.
Oh, wow.
There were several that I worked with who, would probably not get their GEDs, but it was an awesome experience. I had been working with them for probably, I don't know, a year or so when I realized that, wow, this is what I want to do. This is what I just felt a very strong calling, to work with these ladies and how they responded to me, how I responded to them. And it just seemed like it worked. It clicked. It just was something I couldn't put my finger on. And I knew what it was. It was because of God.
I think going back to what that wise woman told you, when you went to seek advice from her, is what she gave you was the freedom for you to learn how to hear from God, not hear for yourself and not hear what she had heard from God. I think so many times in Bible studies, we hear what God is telling other people, but having to learn that process of how to hear from God yourself. And that's what you learned, and that's how you got there to that prison ministry. And
yes,
that's really neat.
In watching what was happening with the ladies and with myself and realizing that, okay, this is what I want to do. I'm not sure exactly how it's going to translate into my life in a practical way, but I know that I want to teach. I want to teach people who have been marginalized, people who maybe other people don't really want to teach, those people. And, and I heard from the ladies, but most of them had been in special ed classes. They all have tremendous stories behind them, hardships and heartbreaking sometimes. And it was one of the GED teachers there who said to me, you should go to Vanderbilt. And I thought, well, I went there once. I know how expensive that is. I can't really do that. And again, when I walked away from her, thinking to myself, I can't do that. I had taken the Beth Moore Bible study. She challenged us all to pray big prayers, to not just ask God for things that we can do in our lives, because that's not really asking God to work. If we just say, oh, can you help me go to take one class at a time at a community college, or wherever that you might go. And so as I walked away from her, I'm like, well, why can't I go to Vanderbilt? And if this is God's plan for my life, and if this is what he wants, then I will just ask him to move in my life and make this happen.
Wow.
And so I started praying that. And I knew that, the first time I went to Vanderbilt, God was not with me. I did not bring him with me. And now this time I was asking him to go before me wherever I went. I started making the moves. As it turned out, I got in and I got a scholarship and I got a job working with a professor. And then there was a lady from church who let me live with her for free.
That's amazing.
And it just, every single thing just lined up.
How did it feel to go back onto a campus that you had graduated 10 years prior?
Awesome. The professor I was working with talking to me, and she asked me the very same question. She's like, some of these girls are right out of undergrad. And I do not care at all. Because this is my path and this is my journey and this is what I'm supposed to do. And God created this. This is not my doing, is how I felt. And so that it just gave me a boldness and a confidence that I would not have ordinarily.
Well, that's awesome. So you totally made a career switch. You went back to school.
Okay. So we're going to switch gears a little bit because it was during this time. So at this point, I had gotten divorced. And I really had thought to myself that, okay, I would not get married again. I felt sure that all the Christian men have already gotten married when they were 20.
They're all taken. There's no one left for you.
Nobody left. Right. So there would be no point. And I was not interested. I did not have that was not on my radar at all. The summer before I started school, I actually spent that whole summer with my parents because I had thought to myself, I'll never have another opportunity to do this again, to spend that time with them. So I'd left my job, spent the summer up there with them, and I just had a lot of really nice, quiet reflection time before I was going to start school. And so it was then that I just started praying to meet someone. And I had my list.
Yeah, tell us about your list.
Yeah, you had some specifics.
I think your list is amazing. What was on it?
The first thing I wanted, of course, was a man after God's heart, and someone who was kind, and someone who would be kind to me. I also wanted someone who would be open to hearing my story and not see somebody who was broken, but someone who would see what God had done and put me back together to be stronger than I ever could have been without going through what I went through. Then, as I started praying, because I would pray all the time for this, for this man. And so my first prayers were very simple, just sort of like what I just said. And then as I started praying, I would say and someone who can really embrace prison ministry and really like that.
Wow.
And then I was like, okay. And someone who, this was kind of a big one. I said, okay, God, I have no right to ask for this, but I would like if you would send me someone who has never been married before. My first husband had been married before, and I just saw that as a prop. Saw that as
contributed
being
to your problems.
Yeah, it did. So I was like, I have absolutely no right to pray for that. And I'm in my 30s.
Right.
So likely that someone has been married before, right? So I know, very unlikely, but okay, on my list, God. Okay. And then I said, I really like to go hiking. So could you send me someone who also likes to hike?
So that the field is getting narrower, narrower, and narrower
as the list gets longer.
Yeah, the list is getting longer. And so also at the time I was starting to run, and I wanted to, on my bucket list is to run in a marathon. And so in addition to, being a man after God's heart and being able to accept my story and like prison ministry and like to hike, never been married before, while you're at it, God, make him a marathon runner. Okay.
Wow.
So you would never think, right? Okay. So I come back to Vanderbilt and I start my program, and I'm introduced to someone, and we start corresponding just on email first through mutual friends. He sends me a picture of himself. He's wearing a hat that says Kilimanjaro.
Oh, wow.
He'd just recently gone on a hike to Africa, to Kilimanjaro. And as I'm finding out about him, he loves the Lord. He's never been married before. He's seeking a woman who loves the Lord. Both of his parents were teachers. And here I am getting my teaching degree. His sister's in Massachusetts, like 15 minutes from where I grew up. Spent a lot of time in Boston. So we have that in common. So as I'm getting to know him, and I'm thinking, wow, he's really, really stacking up. This is really
meeting all the criteria.
So I thought I think I'll test out the waters here. And so we were emailing back and forth, and he's like, oh, what are you doing today? And I was like, well, actually, I told you I got my start in teaching through tutoring GED. Well, I actually tutor GED to women in prison. And so tonight I'm sending some birthday cards and some notes to some of the ladies. Since I'm no longer going in there, I want them to know I'm thinking of them, because it's important for them to know that they still matter. He wrote back and he said, that is awesome. And he proceeded to tell me this story about how he went to Vanderbilt and he studied engineering. And as an engineering student, he had room for 2 electives. One of them was a sociology class that took him to the Tennessee prison for women.
That's amazing.
And when he was there taking his tour, he said that the woman giving her tour at the very end told them that she was not a tour guide, that she was actually a resident.
Oh, wow.
And he used the word resident, not inmate. He used the word resident. And he said that what he learned from that experience was that the people that were there were just people who had made a mistake. And at that, I was like, oh,
getting
my.
like chill bumps. You're like,
Yeah.
wow, God.
Yeah. As I was reading his words, I just was practically in tears saying like, God, like, this is you written all over it. And I, of course didn't want to, project I'm going to marry him because at this point we hadn't even met. We had not even met yet.
But
so
you are starting to think, oh, maybe this is an answer to my prayer.
Something. I was like, somehow God has orchestrated this person and myself for some purpose. And I just don't know what that is yet. So we met, we had coffee. Oh, I left out something else. As we were corresponding, he's run in like no less than a dozen marathons.
That's cool.
Just the cherry on top. So literally every single thing that I prayed for. And so we met for coffee. Things went well. And then we just had one date after another. And I know when we met for coffee, you had asked me how long did I pray for him? Well, I started praying in the summer and we met in October.
Yeah, that's not that long.
Not that long at all. So God moved quickly and he came home with me in November.
Oh my. So you had left in the summer to start graduate school. And then for Thanksgiving, you bring home your new boyfriend.
Yes.
That you prayed for all summer.
Yes. Oh. It was amazing. And then in March, he asked me to marry him.
Oh, that's
and then we were married in August.
Oh, isn't that wonderful? That must have been such a testimony to you to think about spending the summer before at home with your parents praying about that. And then just 1 year later, you're marrying him.
It's already happened.
Yes. It's just, just like the other things, going to Vanderbilt, I just saw God move so succinctly.
Now, do you mind telling us how old your husband is?
He is 9 years older than me. So when we got married, he was 44.
Yes. And all I can think about is, what did his parents think? He's 44. Had they given up hope?
Yes, they had.
They must have embraced you.
I don't think that they thought that he was going to get married, and his extended family either.
What was your parents' reaction?
At the time when I was at my bottom, she had done this. She didn't tell me about it until that summer that I was up there with her. And we were talking, and we really had more time to sit down and talk to each other. She said that, when I called and everything was just falling apart in my life, she didn't know what to do. She just walked and paced the halls of her house and said, God, we are not going to let Satan have our Elizabeth, over and over and over again. And she just prayed that and prayed that and prayed that. It was just, a real testimony to a praying mother, and how she just never let go and knew that the answer to every single problem is God. No matter what it is, it's just turning to God, and, and her sending me that Bible and encouraging me, and phone call after phone call of tears. And I mean, I was a mess. I was a complete disaster. And just her listening and praying with me.
I love your testimony of total self-reliance before that. You had done it all. And from the outward perspective, you probably looked like you had it all together and you were very successful. But then that transition and you're surrendering, to the Lord, and now the total God reliance that you had, and your faith like a child to believe that everything, every word or person or circumstance, that you were constantly looking for what the Lord was doing. And I think at the amount that we trust him is the amount he can move in our lives. And
Absolutely.
We can only, we restrict him when we don't believe him.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Oh, I love it.
All right. So you're married now, Elizabeth, and do you ride off into the sunset, or what happens next year?
They ran off into the
sunset.
Shortly after I got married, we definitely wanted to have children. I had graduated, I had my first teaching job, and we found out we were pregnant. And we were so, so happy. And at the time, we were living in a very small house in Green Hills, which is a little area of Nashville. And so that's when we started looking for our home in Brentwood. We started looking for a home to raise our baby. And on the same day that we closed on our house in Brentwood, we found out that our baby, who is 25 weeks along, her heart has stopped.
Oh.
She was no longer with us. So that was a very, very traumatic event for us. Very, very heartbreaking. I don't even have the words to describe how bankrupt and how just at a loss I was, and we were, and my family was, for this, and to go into Baptist Hospital, into the maternity wing, and give birth to a stillborn baby. It was just awful. So it's a very, very low point. I didn't know how to put one foot in front of another. So
was that a crisis of faith for you? I mean, I know it's naturally very difficult, but would you say it caused you to doubt what God was doing?
Well, I looked at it, and like what I understand now is that people have all different ways of dealing with grief and loss. And my way was more like an internal way. Like I felt like it was a judgment, like that. Why did God take away my baby? Like why would I not have been a good mother? Like I just felt like that it was an indictment on me personally. It was hard to see it as anything else at the time. And also I was working in high school, and I was working with a lot of pregnant teenagers who I knew did not have the means or the stability or the homes. I knew what their environment was. A lot of them lived in homes that didn't have clean dishes. And, and I thought, why do they have, why are they able to have, I mean, it sounds horrible to say, but why can they have a baby and I can't?
Right.
And at the time, even though people were saying like, oh, you'll have another baby, I was like, well, no, like, don't say that to me. Don't say that to me right now, because all I know is that I was supposed to have a baby right now, and I don't have a baby.
Right.
And so it's just a very, very dark time. After she was born, they ran tests, and there were no abnormalities. There were no problems, and there were no problems with me either.
Which must have made it really almost harder, because like to have an answer as to why, but to have the only answer be that God chose to take her,
right,
is such a harder.
Yeah. People asked me that, and I had a very close girlfriend who I taught school with. And so we would, after school ended, we would often sit and talk for a while about this. And she was young. She did not have children yet. And I told her, I said, I think it would almost be harder to know that there was a problem, because then maybe that problem would reoccur. And then I would have something specific to worry about, rather than just feeling like it just happened and there's no other explanation. It's just something tragic that happened. Her heart stopped beating, and we don't know why. And that is all. That she is in heaven and I don't have her. And it is a loss that I have to walk through every day. Of course, back then it was excruciating. And one of the things as I returned to teach after this, I thought, I wish I worked in a cubicle where I could just go into my cubicle and do my job and stare at a computer screen and hide from the whole world. But it was actually very good for me to not do that, because the kids that I worked with are extremely needy. I didn't have time to think about myself while I was with them. They needed me. They needed all of me.
Elizabeth, you and I didn't know each other like really well, but we were in Sunday school with you guys. when you walked through this journey. Bryce and I had experienced miscarriages several years before you. I can still see you and your husband sitting there, and you're completely heartbroken, and I totally understood it. But he had his arm around you, and you kept coming. I know that sometimes you don't understand. It doesn't make sense what God is doing, why he allows certain things. But I just want our listeners to know that during this time, we continue to look to him. You continue to ask him. You can ask him why. You can tell him you don't like it. You can tell him, I'm so mad. I don't understand.
In our grief and inability to understand and cope. And we went to go see Pastor. And one of the things that he told us was, I know that you will be okay because the Sunday after this, you were in church.
Yeah.
And I thought, how does that mean I'll be okay? And I'm not okay. And don't you know that? Like, I'm not okay.
Yeah.
And of course I was in church, because where else would you go? And one of the things that I remember emailing my brother during this time, and him talking about he's not a believer. So he would talk about, well, you have faith and then bad things happen and that doesn't make sense. And I would say, look, this is the bottom line. This is all that I know, is that bad things happen and you have a choice. Do you want to go with God or without God?
Right.
And I know I want to be with God, and that is all that I know.
Yeah.
And it's just one step at a time. And and I'm mad, and I have all these feelings and all these big feelings, all these doubts and fears, and I'll never be a mother, and why not? And I'm mad, and all this, a million different things all the time. But in the news at the time, where I was at home grieving and so brokenhearted and upset, but there was one of the tragic news stories of a young teenager who had given birth, whose parents did not know she was pregnant. She had given birth to twins in a bathroom and put them in the trash can, and they died. And I remember asking God and telling my husband and saying, why would God give her twins to have them die when he should have given me twins and they would live?
Yeah.
And as we know, I have twins.
So even in your grief, God heard that. Yes.
He heard me.
Yes. And the fact that is so significant and stands out to you later, that you could look back and say, oh, I remember that and I hear it. And after you lost your daughter, how long did you wait to try for your second child?
Okay, I was 37 when we lost her. Let's see. I think it was the next summer. So I was 38 when we got pregnant with Will.
Okay. And going through it the second time, I'm sure you had...
It was very anxiety ridden.
Yes, happy,
extremely
but also scared.
Yeah, very, very happy. Yes, and very, very scared. Lots and lots of doctor's appointments. There were times where I was very fearful. There were ultrasound appointments that I was just like, just give me that heartbeat. Hurry, hurry. And then as soon as I heard it, I would just start crying.
Yeah. And you were saying that on your way to work, you would drink, what did you say? It was like Coke and eat Oreos just to get him moving.
Yeah, orange juice. So I had an hour commute, and I would, my sweet husband always packed my lunch for me, and I would grab some orange juice, and I would pretty much eat my whole lunch on the way to school.
That's funny.
But I would eat the Oreos and drink the orange juice, and then little baby Will, who was kind of sluggish normally, he would start moving. And so even to this day, I tell him about doing that and how he would start dancing. I tell him, you start dancing at Bobby's belly. Yeah. And I would sing. I always listen to sing praise music and talk to him and pray out loud and all the way to work for an hour. It's a beautiful memory, and it's something that Will knows. And it's one of those things that, had we not lost Amelia, I don't know if I would have hung on to all those moments with Will as I was pregnant with him. And that's sort of manifesting in him now as he still continues to ask me, tell me about when you would eat Oreos and I would dance in your belly.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so it's imprinted, like all that care, all that intention, like he knows how cared for and how prayed for and how loved he was even before he was born. And part of that is the legacy of Amelia that lives on inside of him now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's a special time. So Will is born, and had you been planning to go back to work?
Oh, yes. I thought that, because it's my calling to teach.
Right.
It's what God wants me to do.
God sent you on a scholarship to Vanderbilt. You're a teacher now.
Yeah, exactly. How could I not teach? Yeah, we put money down on, I went to all kinds of different childcare places and we found the best one we could find and we put our money down and couldn't wait to drop him off there. But when I got him home from the hospital and I had him in my arms for a few weeks, and I remember I looked at Bill and I said, I am not letting him go. I am not. And Bill looked at me. And at the time, and this was kind of interesting too, right at the time we got married, Bill started his own business. And, the economy was in a little bit of a slowdown at the time. So his business took a little bit to get going. And he still was not making what we thought he was not making enough money for us, for our family, that we thought we needed my teacher salary and the insurance that it provided and whatnot. So Bill just said, we will make it work. And at the time things were starting to turn around for him. Business was starting to pick up and make more money. And, everything has been fine.
Oh,
Everything's
that's
been
really
absolutely
cool.
fine.
Yes.
So I was able to stay home with Will.
Yes.
And not let him go.
Good. Yes. So you have a toddler running around. You're getting close to 40.
Yes.
Or maybe you're even a little over 40. And are you thinking, are we going to add to our family or what?
Yeah, oh, yes. I definitely wanted more children for sure. And I remember one night we were giving Will a bath and I said something about having more children. And Bill said, one more. And I said, no, two more.
Uh-oh. Well, we know who prays harder in the family.
That's right. That's right. So Will was about a year and a half. But I thought, because I'm such a type A planner, I'm like, okay, well, if I want to, have the baby by this time, they say it takes months of trying. So okay, let's start trying now. And so we got pregnant right away. Then it was my very first ultrasound appointment. And I was just like, oh, please, let there be a heartbeat. And so I'm in with the doctor and I'm looking at his face. I'm trying to read his face to see what does he see? And I said, do you see a heartbeat? And he said, I can do you one better than that. And I said, did you see two heartbeats?
That's amazing.
And he said, I see two heartbeats.
Oh my
That's
goodness.
awesome.
Just floored.
Was Bill there with you?
Bill was not there with me at that time. So it was that was an awesome phone call to make to him. As soon as I left, I said, "Are you sitting down?" And he said, "More than one baby?" And I said, "Yes, more than one baby." And he said, "More than two babies?" No, not more than two.
How exciting. How exciting. Yes. So in a short amount of time, your family grew very quickly.
Yes. Oh, I was so excited.
How far apart are Will and the twins?
They are 25 months apart.
Okay.
And so did your parents immediately decide to move to Nashville?
Well, actually, it was right at this time when I found out I was pregnant with a twin. It was right before then. Soon after Will was born, they started the wheels for moving.
Okay.
I have their only grandchildren. And so my mom saw Will and sort of like me.
I'm putting my house on the market.
Yeah.
I remember meeting your mom. She is so precious. I remember that so well, how sweet she was.
Yeah, she is such a sweet lady. So yeah, and they had their dream house. They built their house on a lake and it was beautiful. It was everything that they wanted. It was years in the making, and I know they thought they would live out all of their years in that house.
Yeah.
But children change everything.
Right. You just one look at your grandchild, you don't care one bit about that lake house.
Yeah, exactly. They live about 5 minutes down the road.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really
awesome.
Great. So what's your life like now, Elizabeth? I know it's busy. I know all of that. But I guess why I'm asking is because we had a question from a listener, and she said, my husband's 48. Our youngest is 4. My husband will be 62 when my son graduates from high school, and I'll be 56. I'm fearful of missing out. We'll be older grandparents. I don't want to miss any of the moments because we're older. Also, being older parents means our kids will be helping us out sooner than I'd want them to. What would you say to this mom?
I would say all those numbers give me a headache. What's in my heart is to say, wow, that is a very heavy burden to walk around with, even thinking about all of that. We're not promised tomorrow. We have no idea what it's going to be like. By the end of the day, our whole worlds could be different. Hold on to today. That's what I would say. And tomorrow. And it takes care of itself. Be healthy and strong today. I never, ever think about any of this. I know I could do some arithmetic and probably come up with numbers larger than hers, but it doesn't matter. I know too, when you look at your children, you know that the only thing that they care about, they do not care about how old you are, your hair or your wrinkles or anything. All they want is your arms and your kisses and your love and your acceptance. And that's it. In a way, it sounds silly or frivolous to say, just stop worrying about all that. But that would be my answer. Those are facts. We can't do anything about that now. Mm-hmm. That we're going to be
it anyway.
Yeah,
right.
You can't change this number. That's the way it's going to be if we're lucky.
Well, one thing that you said when we met for coffee that I found so inspiring that I'd like you to share is your dad is 88. Is he 88?
Yeah, let's see. He's 4. Okay, so he's 87.
Okay, he's 87. Tell them the trip that he just went on.
Okay, he just took us all on a ski trip.
He's still skiing at age 87.
He is. He skis down that mountain, and he was concerned. He was upset with himself for his form not being as good as he would like for it to be.
I just find that to be absolutely amazing.
It is amazing. And I feel so fortunate to have both of my parents, and that, of course, I feel fortunate for my children that they have their grandparents. Even despite their age, they're in such good health. Of course, I see my dad slowing down and whatnot, and my mother too, but they're still so active. I see in my parents that the most important thing to them is that our kids know God. That is what's most important to Bill and I too, that our kids know God and hear about God's love, and for them to be with the children and to love them. Mm-hmm. And that's all that matters. And so for my little Camilla to run up to her papa and hug his legs, that is everything. That is everything. That's all he needs.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I love your perspective.
Ideally in life, you have a very linear plan of college and married and career and children and whatnot. And mine has obviously not been that. So for me, the most important thing in life, because of my years spent not having God in my life, I know what's most important, which is a relationship with God. And that translates into that is the most important thing for me to share with my children. That is our priority of Bill and I, for that, not just to learn the Bible stories, but to have that in their hearts and in their minds, and to have it just be part of who they are.
Do you still have that dream to teach?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, most definitely. I'm actually wanting to go back to work. I love my children so much. And of course, I feel that they're such a blessing. I do really, really miss teaching my kids, the kids that have the learning disabilities and the issues and the emotional and problems, those non-straightforward kids. In my heart, every time I think about it, I know that God didn't do that just so I could teach for a few years. I don't know exactly what the situation is, but I know that I'll just keep seeking and that He will guide me into the right path and the right position and the right opportunity.
Right. Yeah. I think that anyone that's listening, whether you're young or older, or whether you have kids or not, I think there's so many situations in our life where we may not follow a linear path, or where we may be doing something and then God calls us into something else. And I think that you sharing your testimony about how you just said, God, where do you want to use me? I'm open and I want to do what you want me to do, but I don't really see how to get there. Will you please move and show me? And He was faithful to do that.
Right. I just love a good redemption story where God takes our choices and He transforms them into something even better than we could ever dream up. And it's just a really good reminder that thankfully, even our choices that are apart and far from what He would have chosen for us don't thwart His plans. Like you thought you had missed your shot at a marriage and a family, but you didn't. I mean, He had all this lined up for you and you just didn't know it.
Amazing.
Yeah, it is.
I love having Elizabeth's story because it shows our listeners today's a new day, tomorrow's a new day, and the Lord can do something fresh and new where you are right now, no matter what your circumstances are, that He can come in and breathe new life into you. Also knowing that even when you turned your life over to the Lord, your circumstances don't always change. And certainly not right away, but He changed you instead, which then in turn helped give you a whole new life. It gave you freedom inside of these difficult circumstances. And it didn't mean that following Christ was going to mean that your life was going to be easy, because we heard about your terrible heartbreak that believers still go through difficult times. People sitting in church don't have it all together. We're all there seeking hope and help and answers, just like the rest of the world. So I do hope that anyone listening to this, whether you're in a great situation or you're in a difficult situation, I hope that you hear what God can do in the midst of the journey, in the midst of difficult places in your life, the hope and the freedom He can give you in the journey.
Yeah, and that He didn't come to take away all our problems and give us an easy life. And I love what you said when you said, I realized I could either go through all of this with God or without, and you didn't want to go forward without Him.
That's right.
Thank you so much for coming and sharing with us today, Elizabeth. I'm so encouraged by your story. I think testimonies are so powerful. They're such a lesson for all of us, and it's such a blessing when we share what God's done in our life for other people to hear that. So thank you for being willing to come and talk with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well,
I loved your story.
All right. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Okay. Bye. Friends, we're so glad you joined us today. If you enjoy Midlife Matters, we hope you'll tell a friend. Show them how to find us on their phone and hit the free subscribe button so that they never miss an episode. They can also download and listen to each episode right from our website, midlifematterspodcast.com. We'd love to hear from you. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at Midlife Matters Podcast. You can also email us at midlifematterspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you back here next Wednesday. Bye.